Hi folks, I'm Joe and this is the Gen 5 Runner channel. Today I'm going to show you how I make sourdough starter for overlanding. It's not the same recipe I would use around the house, but it's specifically a recipe that will allow me to carry the starter with me on the road. Let's get to it. The four basic ingredients for any sourdough starter are water, flour, sugar, yeast, and bacteria. The water and flour provide an environment for the yeast to grow in. You can capture the unique yeast that exists in your local area simply by covering the starter with a cheesecloth and putting it in a cabinet for about a week. Another great source of yeast is organic, unwashed, unwaxed, unoiled fruits. That white coating on the outside of grapes and apples and such is yeast that's growing on the surface, and you can capture that simply by putting the peels into your starter. I'm using a commercial dry active yeast for a couple of reasons. One is I don't want to wait a week to capture yeast from some other source, and another is I want to have consistency in the flavor of my sourdough from batch to batch. Once the dry yeast is dissolved, I'm going to add some sugar to the mixture. This gives the yeast something to work on to produce the alcohols that are going to be necessary in order to get our sourdough starter to become sour. While I'm adding the sugar and flour, I'll explain the metabolic processes that are taking place that make sourdough work. The first of the three processes is breaking starches into sugars. This is done by enzymes. The second step is the conversion of the sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide. That's done by your yeast. The final step is the conversion of those alcohols into acids, and that's accomplished by naturally occurring bacteria in the air. These acids are what makes the sourdough starter sour. So let's see what each part of the ingredients does. The flour provides carbohydrates for those enzymes to work on, and that produces sugars. Those sugars are then worked on by the yeast to produce alcohols and carbon dioxide. Finally, those alcohols are worked on by the bacteria to produce acids that make our sourdough starter sour. Now we're adding a bunch of sugar to start with to get this thing to kick off. The reason we do that is so that it'll build up those alcohols more quickly and the bacteria can get busy making those acids. All of this will provide a starter that's ready to use in 24 to 48 hours. To keep our starter alive and in good condition, we need to give it something to eat slowly while we're on the road. For this, I'm choosing a sweet potato. You can use other types of potatoes or even an apple. The reason I choose a sweet potato is it happens to be very high in the enzymes that break down those carbohydrates to produce the sugars for the yeast to work. The sweet potato is the secret that makes this work for overlanding. This starter should remain stable without refrigeration for about 2 weeks, at which point you should throw it out and start a new one. Now, through the magic of time-lapse photography, let's see what happens over the next 12 hours. All of this mess is caused by the CO2 that's produced by the yeast and the gluten in the flour allowing those bubbles to be trapped. Just as it seems that things are going to become completely out of hand, I'm able to stir down the foam on the top of the starter and get it back under control. After 24 hours, the starter has slowed down to the point that I can put it all back in my original container that I use for transporting it when we're going overland. Now notice this container has a pop top, which acts as a pressure release for me. Do not put this in a closed container like a mason jar. It will explode. You can refresh your starter by adding 1 cup of flour, 1 cup of water, and 1 tablespoon of sugar for each cup of starter you use. But be cautioned, it may overflow. Future videos are going to show you how to make sourdough English muffins, sourdough pancakes and biscuits, and how to make sourdough crumpets, all on a griddle, on the stove, on the road. So you don't want to miss that. please click subscribe and hit that little bell so that you get notification when those videos come out. As always, we hope you arrive safe and leave clean. Cheers!